Well, greetings and shalom. This is Adrian Scott, and I welcome you to Truth and Testimony, the broadcast. It is time for some more shekels for your thoughts. Now, I keep doing that. Another interesting topic. They're all interesting to me, or I wouldn't be making these videos. But this one kind of touches on, and I've loosely touched on this in some previous videos, but I'm coming back to it because something just came across our radar recently, and I wanted to mention it to provide kind of an example of something. So the idea is there's endlessly this debate and question that will come up in biblical circles of what version of the Bible is the best one to read. And the answer that I have come up with in all the things that I've looked at is there really is no one version other than going back to the original source that is the perfect version. There are definitely some translations and versions that are better than others, but all of them they got some of it right, they got a little bit of it wrong. I mean, that just is the way it happens. And kind of such is the case on this particular topic. So, a little backdrop, just in terms of how I even came across this. In our house, in our family, we do Bible reading quite frequently. Every Shabbat, we do a reading of the Torah portion. And the way the Torah portion works, at least the style that we do, is you will read, within a 1 year period, you will read the entirety of the Torah, which is the first 5 books of the Old Testament: Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, and Deuteronomy. Then there's a secondary reading that complements that called the Haftarah, and that will feature some other scripture in another part of the Old Testament. Very often it's the prophets. A lot of cases you're going to Isaiah or Jeremiah or Ezekiel, but there's a few other things that you'll go to, Kings, stuff like that. And then for our purposes as Hebrew roots, Messianic, Christian believers, we include a New Testament portion to connect with all of that. So we'll read the Torah portion, and again, the entirety of the Torah in 1 year, and then some corresponding Old Testament segments to go with that, and New Testament to go with that as well. So we do that every Shabbat, and every year we repeat the cycle. Now, when we repeat the cycle, we always will choose a different version of the Bible, just to give us a little bit of a different flavor, and it kind of highlights some of the things like what I'm going to talk about here. Now, above and beyond that, my wife and I, we do nightly reading as we kind of settle in for the evening, and we do the same thing. Now, in our case, we do the entire Bible, Genesis to Revelation, and we've probably read through it 8 or 9 times now. And again, same thing, each time we do it, we'll use a different version. We have duplicated on a few occasions, because we don't necessarily have access to all versions easily, although for our Torah portion, I use my tablet. I have a Bible app on there, and I've actually got a lot of options for versions in that app. But our nighttime reading we do with physical books, and I might have about 7 or 8 different versions in actual physical book form. So we kind of go through those. The most recent that I've added to my collection has been the King James. I just realized that for all these versions, I didn't actually have a King James, which for the most part tends to be one of the stronger versions to use. It still has its inconsistencies at time, but there's a few good things about it. Like they've concealed, well, I don't want to be harsh and say that, they've when they were translating that version, they used rabbis, they used some Orthodox Jewish people to help do so, who of course have a custom of not pronouncing God's name. So every time God's name came up through the Old Testament, which is 6,828 times, instead of putting in Yud He Vav He, which would be the 4 letters of his name, also known as the Tetragrammaton, instead they replaced it with the word Adonai. In English, the word Lord. And the thing that we can thank the King James translators for doing is they put the word Lord all in capital letters. So anytime you're reading your Old Testament and you see a Lord with capital L-O-R-D, you know that behind that, in the Hebrew manuscripts that were used to translate from to get the King James, that it is Yud He Vav He, the name of God. In our house, we pronounce it Yehovah, but Yahweh is another variation of that that's very popular. So they did something like that. So at least you know that it's happening. It's not been concealed, right? Another one is anytime there were instances where they added some words here and there, generally for clarification, because in a lot of cases, and anybody that knows language, and we're not just talking Hebrew here or English, but it could be, a lot of different languages. There's not just a straight word-for-word translation. Sometimes you have to come up with more of an idea or a sense of what the word is. If they needed to do something like that in the King James and they added some language to clarify that particular word translation, they added those words in italics. So that's another thing if you're reading your King James. Anytime you see any words that are italicized, those were added by the King James translators, again, typically for clarification purposes. So that's a couple of things that make the King James good. They made some alterations, which are not necessarily evil or anything like that, but when they did, they made it clear that the alterations were there. Some versions just cover it up. They change stuff and you have no idea that it's been changed. So, with that being said, in our recent reading, we've been going through the book of Genesis again. And this is where this one comes up. Now, in this particular pass, we did something a little bit different. This is not a version that we ever really used much of in the past for anything, but said, well, you know what, let's do a reading through the Torah portion cycle using this, and that is the Douay-Rheims. Now, for anyone that may not know, the Douay-Rheims Bible, or DRB, is the short form of it. That is the standard Catholic Bible, which I believe is still used in the Catholic Church. It, unlike the King James, for example, was translated from Hebrew and Greek sources. That's where it was translated from. Different versions were translated from different sources. The Douay-Rheims, I believe, if I'm not mistaken, was translated almost entirely from the Latin, if not entirely. But the Latin was the primary source behind the translation. They brought it from Latin into English. So it makes it a little bit different in that sense because Latin is not one of the original languages, right? I think most people would agree the original languages were Hebrew and Greek. You can make a strong case for Aramaic and a few other things as well. But really the main ones, the big ones, are Hebrew and Greek. So in the Douay-Rheims, and we were doing Genesis chapter 7, it stated something which really jumped out at me because it's different from a lot of other versions that we have read. And this was, to me, an example of one of those times where there may have been a subtle change and you might not even catch it right away. Now, I wanted to highlight this from the Douay-Rheims, but I'm also going to include a few other passages from a few other versions to show that this is not an entirely uncommon thing, and it's certainly not exclusive to the Douay-Rheims for this purpose. So the passage itself is Genesis chapter 7 and is verse 1. So let me read from the Douay-Rheims. I'm just going to read all of verse 1, and I'm going to give you a couple of other examples. So in the Douay-Rheims, it says, "And the Lord said to him, Go in thou and all thy house into the ark, for thee I have seen just before me in this generation." And that again is the Douay-Rheims. Now to read that same passage, this time I'm reading it from the English Standard Version, or ESV, and it says, "Then the Lord said to Noah, Go into the ark, you and all your household, for I have seen that you are righteous before me in this generation." And the third one is the New Living Translation, or NLT, which says, and there's an added one here, "When everything was ready, the Lord said to Noah, Go into the boat with all your family, for among all the people of the earth I can see that you alone are righteous." So the basic gist is the same. Now the thing I note is, what is when everything was ready? Like, that's not in any other version that I just read, or in the other ones that I'm about to read, when everything was ready. So this absolutely was something that the NLT translators added to their version to try to make it more understandable, or for whatever reason. but they added it. And the only problem I really have with that is they made no note that they added it. So unless you cross-reference, you may not know that when everything was ready, I would get the impression that's not in the original source manuscripts, Hebrew, Greek, that this is something that those translators added when everything was ready. Now, on the flip side, and here's the difference, because you have no idea what I'm talking about yet. So now, going to the King James, we got to start with the good old King James. That same passage, Genesis chapter 1, or chapter 7, verse 1, sorry. And it says, "And the Lord said unto Noah," and Lord there, by the way, is that capital L-O-R-D, so you know that it's Yud-He-Vav-He behind that. "And the Lord said unto Noah, Come thou and all thy house into the ark, for thee have I seen righteous before me in this generation." And not to leave the King James on its own, let's get some witnesses here. The Scriptures, or ISR, Institute for Scriptural Research, it reads in that passage, "And Yud-He-Vav-He said to Noah, Come into the ark, you and all your household, because I have seen that you are righteous before me in this generation." And then the last one to go hand in hand with that is the International Standard Version, the ISV, which says, "Then the Lord told Noah, Come, you and all your household into the ark, because I've seen that you alone are righteous in this generation." So there you go. Thank you. Have a good day. I'll see you in the next video. No. Did you catch the difference? There's one, to me, it may seem like a very small difference, but to me, it's actually pretty significant. Did you catch it? Right at almost at the beginning of the verse, in the first three versions, it says, "Go in, go into the ark." Right? And then the last three that I read, it says, "Come, come into the ark." Now, can I just propose an idea here? Think relationally, where would God need to be if he's telling them to go into the ark? That he's somewhere else. He's above, he's in heaven, he's looking down, he's off to the side. Whatever the case may be, he's here, Noah and his sons are there, the ark is over here, and he's saying, go into the ark. But in those other three, he's saying, come. Now, relationally, where does that put him? It puts him on the ark with them. When he's saying, come to me, come into the ark here, right? Maybe I'm reading too much into that, but I think that could be a big deal. It really changes that perspective, that he's with you or that he's over you or directing you from outside. Because Yud-He-Vav-He, Yehovah, Yahweh, he is the king of the universe. He is the creator of everything. But you know what? He is also Abba. He is Daddy. And I think as any good loving parent, he would be right there with his kids. And we can see examples of that. Probably the most classic is Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego when they're thrown into the furnace and they are not even, they don't even smell like smoke, right? And when they look inside of this enormous blast furnace that was turned up much harder than normal, they're perfectly fine. And there was a fourth person there, or a fourth being there with them, right? With them. And that to me, I think, could be a big context change from go into the ark and come into the ark. So that's just something that stood out to me in that Douay-Rheims. Not saying, as I just showed, Douay-Rheims isn't the only one that does that. I could have found a lot more. I just wanted to give a few examples either way. So this shows that, no version is perfect. You do get variations from version to version. So I find the best way to cover the Bible, if you really want to do it right, is use multiple versions and cross-reference. Back to that app on my tablet, it gives me the option to split the screen and have parallel. So I can have one version on one side of the panel, one version on the other. Literally fall as I'm scrolling up and reading through, it's going up on the other side so I can go back and forth. Now I usually use the parallel and put it into Hebrew. I don't know Greek, so that one I just pick another version. But when Hebrew is available, I put it into the Hebrew because as slowly as I have to do it, I can read it. And I'll check it out in Hebrew, pick out particular words. I can go hit my Brown Driver Briggs or my Concordance or anything else if I need to Strong's, to look up a word to get a better definition of something. But I use that cross-reference. So that's what I like to do. I recommend it for everyone. There are things, one of the, probably one of the most vilified versions out there is the NIV, the New International Version. And you could make pretty strongly the case, for good reason. There's some pretty egregious stuff in there. But I heard someone who's a philologist, who's a manuscript researcher, that's what that is, who reads those source documents, and they found multiple instances where the NIV got it right, and the King James did not. So there's even times when the King James kind of dropped the ball and the NIV got it right. So, I still would definitely recommend personally the King James over most other versions. But as I just pointed out, there's a lot you can read. Read any different versions. We're reading the Douay-Rheims. I don't agree with the Catholic Bible. They've made some pretty egregious changes, which we're going to be coming up when we start covering the book of Exodus. But, and there's other ones above and beyond that. But I'm still reading it. It's still got a lot of truth in it. It is the Word of God. Ultimately, it is the Word of God, whatever version or translation that you're going with. So that's kind of that thought. If you enjoyed the video, don't forget to give it a thumbs up, share it with others. That's always a big one for us, and it helps us out and our content to reach others in multiple ways. It does that. And if you have not done so, subscribe to the channel, hit the notification bell so that you are notified each time Ray or I or Susan or Chris or a combination of us drops a video on the channel. Content will be picking up at some point. We are all just dealing with a lot of stuff right now. I finally had an opportunity to sit down and do this, but more is coming. So you don't want to miss it when it does. And on that note, I think I'll wrap it up there. I just wanted to mention that. A little bit of homework and research for everyone. But yeah, feel free to use some different versions as you're spending your time with your family or on your own with the Bible. On that note, I wish blessings to all of you in the name of Yeshua our Messiah. I'll say shalom and bye for now.